Hello, members, friends, and regular guests of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Hendersonville, North Carolina. Special hello to those of you who have found your way to this, the first of what will surely be a series of recorded services and other offerings as we make the transition. A transition, for now at least, from live worship to virtual worship. If we haven't met, my name is Don Rollins, and since last August, I've served as the accredited interim minister to this fellowship, and my pronouns are he, him, and his. If you're new to Unitarian Universalism, let me offer you my brief description of the shared values at the heart of our religious tradition for over 200 years. And they are the freedom to follow one's truth, community to help us on the path, and a yearning for peace with justice. Slight commercial. If you'd like to know more about the congregation, go to uufhnc.org. Again, that's uufhnc.org. And to check out our wider movement, go to uua.org. Again, uua.org. Folks, let me remind you of the obvious. Your board and staff and I determined that the interior of all UUFH buildings will be closed until they're safe for our return. And while I'll make no further announcements in this pilot service, going forward, we'll make space for details. Meantime, be sure to look for e-blast throughout the week, which will include how to submit announcements as well as your joys and sorrows. And then lastly, keep in mind that religious communities all across this world are where you and I are. There's a learning curve from traditional to virtual worship, and it's steep for those not used to using this medium. So expect the essentials, feel the Spirit, and most of all, remember what it feels like to laugh together in this very room. For as one of our rounds reminds us, this is no caravan of despair. The flaming chalice has been the primary symbol of our denominations, two, and now one, since 1941. And we light this chalice with these words adapted from retired UU minister Kirk Lodeman Copeland. Deeper springs. And we are called to seek and to share comfort for the hurts that afflict. And we are called to desire more love, more justice, and life more abundant. Let us answer those calls with the yes of our lives. One of the things we're still researching is what our responsibilities are to copyright laws and the folks who have written and produced music for us. So we're still looking into that. But for today, you're stuck with one original and then not stuck with a lovely hymn that's going to be very familiar to you, one that is in the public domain. UUFH regulars know that when the children are with us for the first part of the service, I experiment with music that might not totally bore them, If there's one song that at least gets their attention, it's my goof on the grown-ups who talk down to kids. The quick story is this. I'm on staff of a large church as the religious educator. In order to get from the classrooms and fellowship hall to the sanctuary, made for a very congested hallway. So I'm as usual shuffling my way to the education wings when I bump into a child of 5 or 6. And I look down, she looks up, and then I realize what she's really seeing are the large nostrils on this generous nose. And then it occurs to me, if I want to connect with kids, the first step is to stop leading the conversation from above, be that real or figuratively. And thus the song. So I'm going to sing the chorus through once and then sing the verses. If you're of a mind and ideally not watching this in a public place, join me on the chorus. Let's sing Nose Holes. Your part. Nose holes, you got big. Nose holes, are you showing me are those nose holes? Nose holes are all I can see. Tell me how's the weather way up there? Please, mister, don't you sneeze. You know that it would only be fair. You got down on your knees, stop giving me nose holes. You got big nose holes, all you show me are the nose holes. Yeah, your nose holes are all I can see. You know that I can't see your face, and I can't see your eyes. How can we relate? When you're twice my size, you got them big old nose holes. You got big nose holes. All you show me are those nose holes. Big nose holes are all I can see. Tell me, am I a part of you? Are you a part of me? Now how we gonna work this through? Those big pipelines are all I see. Stop giving me nose holes. You got big nose holes. All you're showing me are those nose holes. Yeah, your nose holes are all I can see. Nose holes are all I can see. You got nose holes looking at me. As we get further into this time together, not today, but as we get into all those adaptations, all those changes we have to make in how we do things in terms of connection, as we do that, I don't want to forget the kids. I don't want to forget your youth. So one of the ways we can do that until your religious educator and I can get together is to share a story. This one is about money. So as we kind of lead ourselves toward the topic of the day, stewardship, here's a story from Natalie Babbitt called The Bus for Dead Horse. There was once a nice old man, and his name was Mr. Moon, who was rich as a king and lived in a big house full of beautiful things. He had 4 children, but they weren't nice. They had grown up greedy and quarrelsome, different as they could possibly be from their father. And those 4 could start an argument over anything, whether or not rain is wet. They were so disagreeable that Mr. Moon gave up on them, finally, and turned his attention to his cat. Then one day the old man came down with a fever and took to bed, where he stayed for a while. The doctors tried everything, but seemed to think of nothing to be helpful. So the children, except remember they were all grown up, hung about in their father's house, waiting perhaps for the end. And while they hung about, they looked at all the beautiful things. When the time comes, said one, I get the silver bowl. No, I want the silver bowl, said the second. I always like that best. You can have the forks and the spoons. These forks and spoons were meant for me, said the third. No, I want the bowl, said the second. I always liked it. Didn't you hear that? Those spoons and forks are for me. You can have the breakfast china and the paintings. A few of the paintings anyway, because I want most of those too. Well, I want some paintings too, said the breakfast china son. And I want that big lace tablecloth, said the fourth. So you'll have to be satisfied with the mantel clock. I'm taking a suit of armor from the upstairs hall. Oh, no, you aren't. That's mine. Who makes you think you ought to get the silver bowl and the armor? The same thing that makes you think you're going to get the tablecloth and the breakfast china and the paintings. And so this went on and on. They argued, got a little noisier as they went. Until last, the doctors came downstairs. This racket you're making is disgraceful. With your father feeling ill, you'll have to leave the house if you can't keep quiet. Well, of course, the children, except don't forget they were all grown up, they couldn't keep quiet for a minute, so they had to leave the house. And at the corner, they were still so busy arguing that they got on the wrong bus. It wasn't the crosstown bus at all, but a special bus headed for Dead Horse, Alaska, which is so far north there's nothing to do there but shiver, and the children didn't even notice until it was too late to get off the bus. So there they were, in Dead Horse, where the bus froze over and couldn't come back. And so they never heard of those children again. And you know, in the meantime, old Mr. Moon suddenly took a turn for the better, much to the joy of his cat and his doctors. And in a day or two, he was up and good as new. He did wonder for a while what had become of those children, but in case it slipped your mind, they were all grown up after all, able to take care of themselves. And so Mr. Moon didn't worry so much about him. And after a few years, he simply changed his will, leaving the house and all the beautiful things to his cat. And they turned into a home for wandering cats. And this is the way it all worked out, friends. Cats came from far and wide when the home was opened and lived long and happy lives there. They took turns napping in the silver bowl and ate tuna and liver from the breakfast china in perfect harmony, and they never took the wrong bus. In fact, there never was another bus for Dead Horse, Alaska after that one. Isn't that peculiar? Many a faith community makes space for the sharing of life's blessings and hardships. Some call it the prayers of the people, others invoke the elements, sometimes fire and air in the form of a candle, and they ritualize their significant life transitions. At the UU Fellowship of Hendersonville, the elements of stone and water, they give voice to those deep things. Later this week, we'll give you directions for how to briefly tell us what's going on in your lives. But for this first service, let me place some stones that I believe will speak for the many. This stone is for those of a fearful mind. This stone is for those of the painful body. This stone is for those of the lonely spirit. This stone is for those who are lost on the journey. And this stone is for those who are determined. This stone is for those who feel strong. This stone is for those who are at peace. And this stone is for those of you who stand ready to help. And finally, this stone is for you. This stone is for you and it's for me. It's for all of us, wherever we find ourselves today. good news for some of you is this makeshift service, there's no offering this week. The even better news, at least for the good folks who are heading up the stewardship drive, which is just unfolded here at UUFH, those folks will be glad to hear I'm going to talk about money, even in uncertain times. And here's the best news. My spouse, Mary, is going to help you come to rest for a few minutes, to offer you some time to just turn off the news, turn off all those what-ifs in your head, maybe even let go of the threat that you feel in these days. So if you're somewhere where you can be seated and quiet, that would be best. If not, maybe you want to pause or come back to this part of the video when you're better able to take it in.
Hello, bear with me just a minute. Sit that over there, thank you. And I'm a little bit shorter than my husband, so pull out my handy dandy stool. There we go.
Better looking too, I might add.
The present moment may not always be a place of peace, especially now. But mindfulness can help us put our difficult feelings into perspective. Mindfulness is, in essence, the practice of being here now. By focusing on the present moment, we help to take away some of those what-ifs that stoke the fires of our anxiety. When you allow yourself to feel and acknowledge your worries, irritations, fears, and other difficult thoughts and emotions, this often helps them dissipate. Mindfulness also helps you create a space around your worries so they don't consume you. So what we're going to do today is a practice that you can take with you and use almost everywhere, almost anytime you are feeling anxious. Let's begin by doing a check-in with ourselves. Get comfortable. Notice your breath. Feel the rise and fall of your chest and abdomen as you breathe in and out. When you breathe in calm. And when you breathe out tension. Now starting with your feet, notice any tension you're holding there and relax those muscles as you breathe. Moving up your body, feel the tension you hold in your legs and relax them. Breathe in, breathe out. Feel your abdomen relax with your breath. Feel your chest relax. Breathe in calm. Breathe out tension. Release the tension in your hands and your arms. Feel those muscles relax. Breathe in, breathe out. Be aware of the tension we all hold in our necks and shoulders. Move those shoulders around. Release that tension. Breathe in, breathe out. Relax the muscles in your face and in your jaw. We all hold so much tension in our jaws. Yawn, stretch. Breathe in, awareness to the sounds around you. The sound of my voice, the sound of the guitar, and all those small hidden sounds in the room around you. The sounds of our daily lives that we so often shut out. Hear them. Hear the sound of your own breath as you breathe in calm and breathe out tension. And notice what smells are around you. The smells of your house, or the room you're in, or if you're outside. What are those smells? Breathe them in and breathe out. Now notice what you physically feel. How your feet feel in contact with the ground. If you are sitting or lying down, how your body rests against what holds it. Where are your hands resting? Feel that contact. Pay attention to where you are in the physical world right now. How is it with your soul? With your mind? Are you calm, fearful, anxious, grateful, hurting? Acknowledge your feelings. Don't judge them as good or bad or right or wrong. Sit with them as a part of you. Sit with them as you breathe in, calm, and breathe out, tension. Now pay attention to the life around you. What life do you see, or hear, or feel? Your own life energy, and the life energy that surrounds you always. That life is a singing energy that grounds us. It says, you are here now, and you are not alone.
My inbox has been clogged all week with colleagues asking, what can we do for ourselves and for each other? We're just getting started here on what a journey that could be very long. And so as we talk about what to do and what to say, There's about at least half of the 25 or so people I've spoken with so far are bemoaning the fact that they're in pledge season, that this is an odd time to try to raise money. But I also see that many of the congregations are stepping up as best they can to understand this is a different era, requires different ministry, requires different budgeting. So, more on that as we go along. But for now, let me tell you why I think it's important to invest in this congregation, no matter what comes. You probably know the story of the famous sea captain who was much beloved for his skills in bringing crews back to port. No matter the weather, he came through. But like many gifted people, he had some peculiar habits. In this case, prior to setting sail, he would disappear into his quarters for what the crew took to be a moment of prayer or meditation. One day, while walking the decks, a young seaman found himself just outside the captain's room. Peering in, he saw the captain reach up to a shelf, remove a small box, glance at its contents, and then return it to its hiding place. He looked in the mirror, smoothed his coat, made for the bridge. The young seaman tried to resist the temptation to know what was in the box, but in the end could not. Sneaking slowly down the steps and into the captain's quarters, he went to the shelf, took the box, opened it, and there he found a single sheet of paper. It was folded, it was yellow. Taking a last look to make sure he had not been discovered, he unfolded the sheet of paper and it read, "Starboard is right, port is left." Also, I want to suggest to you, church itself is about the basics. It's about the fundamentals. It's about the essentials, especially in times of anxiety. Let me add, too, this is that time of year where you talk about money more overtly. You've been here before, and so have I. The preacher kicks off the stewardship campaign. Members of the congregation offer testimonies about how they have been blessed and how they have been changed to be a part of this community. They talk about how their children have been or are being shown the world through a liberal religious lens, a lens about peace and justice. Depending on the congregation's culture and practices, there may be a kickoff event, captains assigned to particular areas where members and friends live, one-on-one appeals, a big old thermometer outside the sanctuary indicating progress toward the target number, and then a wrap-up party that was celebratory or subdued depending on how the pledges came in. Ahead of time, each team and task force was expected to submit a budget request. Too often looked an awful lot like the one before, which was probably coming out of the Clinton administration. By now, a draft budget would have been prepared by the Finance Committee, adjusted and put forth by the board, discussed in an open meeting, and ready for debate and eventual adoption at the annual meeting. The new fiscal year will then roll around, usually beginning on July 1st, and everyone will live within their means until the next March or so, when the machination of raising money once again start over, world without end. Amen, amen. This is a dry recipe. Sometimes yields results, so long as the people are in maintenance, not growth mode. I'll come back to that in a few minutes. Because on the occasion of your 2020-21 stewardship campaign, I want to get you, like the sea captain in the story, thinking about the basics of being, not just funding, the UU Fellowship of Hendersonville. This is not a matter of semantics, for seeing through the lenses of your present and your future, most of what Henderson County knows and will ever know about Unitarian Universalism starts and ends here at the corner of Cayuga and Patterson. And what those folks are and will be looking for have little to do with committees or capital improvements, whether the interim minister is known to regularly butcher the English language, because based on the facts at hand, what those folks are looking for when they darken the door is a place on fire, not literally. A place on fire with four things: a sense of mission, clear, and articulated. Ministry that is shared across the board. Music that moves and challenges and comforts. And oh, by the way, they talk about money. So let me tell you what I'm talking about here with 4 stories, starting with mission, often the most difficult to grasp, but without which a congregation is often chaotic or worse yet, without a saving message that constantly calls them to be different, calls them beyond their comfort zone. Good story from Angela Mayayu. It's about Mrs. Scott. Mrs. Scott, a woman well past middle age, fancied younger men. She was a regular churchgoer and used each gathering to search for the objects of her choice. And all the young men in her town were very aware of her predilections, so she was not successful in snaring them. And then one day, a new fellow appeared at the meeting house. He was handsome, and although he was an adult, he was still young enough to be a little gullible. The woman caught him directly after the service, invited him to her home for late Sunday afternoon dinner. He gratefully accepted. She rushed home, killed a chicken, put it on to fry. And while the chicken cooked, Mrs. Scott took a small needle from her sewing kit and, putting on her bifocals, picked her way down the lane from her front door. And when she reached a tree 100 yards away, she stuck that needle in the bark and returned to the kitchen to finish preparing the meal. When the young man arrived, they sat down for dinner, for Mrs. Scott was an excellent cook. And after they finished, Mrs. Scott invited the young man to sit on the front porch swing with her and let his dinner digest. She brought out lemonade, sat with him. Dusk was falling now, and the shapes of things were blurred. And all of a sudden, Mrs. Scott sat bolt upright and turned to the young man. "What on earth is that I see sticking in that tree?" She pointed down the lane to the oak, which was barely a shadow in the darkness. And the young man, squinting, tried to pierce the gloom. "Mrs. Scott, I can't hardly see the tree. And you're telling me there is something sticking out?" "Yes, Mrs. Scott." She had now relaxed her scrutiny. "At first I thought it was a pin, but when I looked for the head, it wasn't there. And I saw instead a hole. So that's got to be a needle." The young man turned and looked at Mrs. Scott with admiration. "You know, ma'am, when you left church this morning, some folks told me to be careful, that you had a taste for younger men. But I must say, if you can see a hole in a needle 100 yards away after the sun has gone down, you're not nearly as old as they say." Mrs. Scott was now proud of her compliments, but forgetful of her subterfuge, and said, "Well, thank you for that. I'll just go get that needle and show it to you." And so she flounced up out of that swing, jauntily went down the stairs, and when she reached the bottom step, she turned to smile at the appreciative young man, and then continuing, she walked 2 steps and tripped over a cow sitting in the lane. What Mrs. Scott lacked in the ethics department, she more than made up with the clarity of mission. Folks, I'm asking you to support a mission, not just pay light bills or make payroll. Because you're worth investing in yourselves. You do some awesome ministry within and without the walls here at Patterson Street. Think about it. You tell people they're good from the inside out, not the other way around. You see one another through hard times, not just the good. You're a witness for reasonable religion. Most of the time, you talk straight up. And you know there's a world out there that awaits your help. There is justice to be done if you'll pool your resources. The resources of time and skills and, yes, dollars. In other words, as the late ambassador for Unitarian Universalism, Peter Fleck, put it, you're willing to be disturbed by the deep troubles of the world. So remember that you and I are trying to offer, in our own falling down way, a unique heritage that does not always comfort. Our history tells us that we're at our best when we're taking chances, but that doesn't mean we have to like being that vulnerable. Vulnerable to self, to one another, to the pain and the trauma that will break our hearts if we only dare to look. So look here, like Mrs. Scott, you're on a mission, but your heart's in a better place than hers. Isn't that worth upping your giving? Let's talk ministry and a story about ministry. Chances are, when folks say ministry around here, what comes to mind is an ordained minister. Because the title alone indicates a commitment to the well-being of others, as well as the well-being of the congregation that we serve. And rare is that vibrant congregation without creative, out-front clergy willing to practice both the arts and science of leadership, for those people to be willing to fail. And the minister whose name is on the wayside pulpit here at Canuga and Price Road will always matter, for that minister will always be your partner in spiritual mischief. But I fear that our denomination has been too slow to honor the work of others, especially lay folk, as true ministry. Here's a story you might know. It's an adapted version of the original written by Father Francis Dorff. It was titled The Rabbi's Gift. Once a great order, a decaying monastery only had 5 monks. The order was clearly dying. In the surrounding deep woods, there was a little hut that a rabbi used now and then, and the monks began to realize that, and they thought about the rabbi, and when he was home, for he often saw the smoke from his fire rising above the treetops. As the abbot agonized over the imminent death of his order, it occurred to him to ask that rabbi if perhaps he could offer any advice that might save the monastery. The rabbi welcomed the abbot at his hut, and when the abbot explained the reason for his visit, the rabbi could only commiserate with him. "I know how it is," he exclaimed. "The spirit has gone out of the people. It is the same in my town, and almost no one comes to the synagogue anymore." So the abbot and the rabbi sat together, discussing the Bible and their faiths. The time came when the abbot had to leave. "It has been a wonderful visit," said the abbot, "but I have failed in my purpose. Is there nothing you can tell me to help save my dying order?" "The only thing I can tell you," said the rabbi, "is that the Messiah is among you." When the abbot returned to the monastery, his fellow monks gathered around him and asked, "What did the rabbi say?" "He couldn't help," the abbot said. "The only thing he did say was, 'As I think about it, there's a Messiah among you.' That's what he told us. A Messiah among us. But I confess I have no idea what that means." In the months that followed then, the monks pondered this and wondered whether there was any possible significance to that rabbi's words. The Messiah is among us. Could he possibly have meant the Messiah is one of us monks here at the monastery? If that's the case, which one of us is the Messiah? Do you suppose he meant the abbot? I'm sure he meant, if anyone, Father Abbot. Certainly he could not have meant Brother Eldred. Eldred gets crotchety at times, but come to think of it, even so, Eldred is often right. Maybe the rabbi meant Brother Eldred, but I doubt, they'd said to each other. But of course, of all, the rabbi didn't mean me. He couldn't possibly have meant me. I'm an ordinary person. Yet, supposing he did, suppose I'm the Messiah. As they contemplated in this manner, the monks began to treat each other with extraordinary respect on the off chance that one of them might be the Messiah. And so it happened that people still occasionally come to visit Forrest and the monastery. Without even being conscious, visitors began to sense a powerful spiritual aura. They were sensing the extraordinary respect that now filled that old monastery. And hardly knowing why, people began to come. They picnicked, they played, they prayed. They brought their friends, and their friends brought their friends. And they began to bring more and more and more people. And then it happened that some of the younger men who came to visit the monastery asked if they might join. And then another and another asked if they could be part of that community. And today that monastery is thriving. It's a vibrant center of light and spirituality in a realm not always familiar. Folks, think about this. Leading your choir is ministry. Taking care of your children, youth, and their caregivers is ministry. Keeping the books, running the office, serving as the director of a free clinic, these are ministries, not jobs. But then again, so is leading a team or a committee or a task force or whatever creative term we inevitably are going to argue over. Same with the good souls who take care of these buildings and grounds when we're not here. Those who take care of the flowers, the staffing, the wayside pulpit out there. Those who do the heavy cleaning of this sanctuary and offices. So your fellowship is rich with ministers, ordained and beyond. Raising your pledge is one way of saying thanks for all that they do. Music. Given the joy Catherine and the UUFH choir bring your way, I may not have to plug the music at all. But either way, here's a story about the power of music. It comes from author and former UU minister Robert Fulgen. The big deal of my summer was a week in Weiser, Idaho. And maybe that's hard to believe, because if you've ever looked at an Idaho map, you know that Weiser is pretty much smack in the middle of nowhere. But if you can play the fiddle, Weiser, Idaho is the center of the universe. The Grand National Old Time Fiddlers Contest is there in the last week of June, and since I fiddled around some in my time, I decided to go. Now, 4,000 people live there in normal times. 5,000 more come out of the bushes and trees and hills for the contest. The town stays open around the clock, fiddling in the streets, dancing at the VFW hall, fried chicken at the Elks Lodge, and free camping at the rodeo grounds. And people come from all over. Fiddlers from Pottsboro, Texas, Sapulpa, Oklahoma, Thief River Falls, Minnesota, Caldwell, Kansas, Three Forks, Montana, and just about every crossroads town you can mention, and by the way, throw in Japan too. Now, it used to be that the festival was populated by country folk, pretty straight types, short hair, church on Sunday, women in their place, and all that. And then the long-haired hippie freaks began to show up. The trouble was, the freaks could fiddle too, really, really well. And so the town turned over the junior high and its grounds to the freaks. The contest judges were put in isolation rooms where they could only hear the music, couldn't see what folks looked like or what even their names would be, just the fiddling. As one old gentleman put it to me, son, I don't care if you wear a ring in your nose and your ear. I don't care if you're stark naked. As long as you can fiddle in that booth, it's okay with me, because it's the music that counts. So he writes, I was standing there in the middle of the night, in the moonlight, in Weiser, Idaho, with about 1,000 people who were picking and singing and fiddling together. Some had bald heads, some had hair to their knees. Some had a joint, some with a long-neck bottle of Budweiser. Some had beads. Back in the day, some even had Archie Bunker t-shirts. Some 18, some 80, some with corsets, some with no bras, and the music rising into the night to whatever gods and goddesses of peace and goodwill there may be. And I was standing there, and this police officer, a real honest-to-God, Weiser police person who was standing next to me holding a banjo, and I swear this happened, he looked over to me and said, sometimes the world seems like a fine place, doesn't it? And then Robert puts in the amen. Oh yes again. Yes, indeed. Again, UUFH friends, and by that I mean members and friends, regular guests, I don't think I have to make the case for music here. You have a taste of the power of live music, at least 3 times a month for most of the calendar year. But what if you decided to go big? What if you decided to make a regular stream of guest musicians with all kinds of styles, including music for children? How would it be to be known as a place where stirring music happens Sunday after Sunday, and it's always changing, always a little bit scary, because we haven't been there before? And if you will, maybe think about a return to the monthly concerts, or at least every so often concerts. What I'm asking you is to imagine a shift in your self-identity and your self of purpose. What if your role is to address and help keep trauma that happens all around and do it in the form of music? What would it feel like to be that place? Finish off with money. Or as a friend once told me, ask him to reach in them jeans and pull out them greens. Yes, another story. This time a story from the Islamic tradition as told by retired UU minister Gary Smith. From time to time, whenever the Qadi, that would be judge, who governed the village and gave judgment in the court, would be absent. And when that happened, the role was given to Hajjah, the Holy One. And it was under just such circumstances that one day there was presented to the court an unusual and difficult case. Seems a local innkeeper brought suit against a poor student in these terms: "He has lingered outside my restaurant, Holy One, and thus has stolen from me." "And what has he stolen?" inquired the Hajjah. "The good smell of my food," replied the innkeeper. "Unwilling to pay for the food itself, he has lingered around the door of my kitchen daily and availed himself of what was not his, the aromas of my wonderful cooking. Thus I work so hard, and this scoundrel takes advantage of my labors and will not pay." "Is this true, young man?" the Hajjah asked. "It is, Holy One. I'm a poor student, scarcely able to pay for my room and my books. I live on scraps that I beg wherever I can. But those wonderful smells from the inn I could not resist, and so daily I've been hanging about the kitchen, imbibing those odors, and thus imagine I am eating those very delicacies." "And have you any money on you now?" asked the Hajjah. "Only a few coppers." The judge then asked to have them handed over. And as the student passed his last coins to the Hajjah, the innkeeper smiled with satisfaction. The Hajjah turned to him and said, "Innkeeper, close your eyes and listen well to my judgment." Puzzled but still certain the Hajjah would find for his side, the innkeeper closed his eyes. And then with his eyes shut, he heard the coins being jingled in the Hajjah's hand. "Do you hear, innkeeper?" asked the Hajjah. "Indeed I do. It is the sound of justice, is it not?" Came the solemn voice of the Hajjah. "Good. Then the sounds of the coins has paid for the smells of the food." And with that, the Hajjah returned the coins to the student and bade them both farewell. This is simple stuff. Gary Smith reminds us if someone or something has blessed our lives, it is nothing short of a spiritual act to return it in kind. And he tells us if we have experienced more than the smell, we got to think about giving more than the jingle. And folks, here's where I stop to say everybody has a financial reality. In my case, I have been flat broke more than once. And I've been flush, at least according to my standards as a democratic socialist. Point is, there's no one size fits all here. And all you can expect it to do is all you can do. And that has to be your call. But also know that this is a critical period in the life of this fellowship. The proposed budget is about going beyond last year's stretch, which was also considerable. It's about doing right by your staff, making sure the family ministries programs never want for funding good ideas. And your teams and your committees, likewise, they are stretching. They need funding. So, your board and stewardship team have already exceeded last year's giving by far. And while nobody's going to give a wing of the fellowship hall in our names, Mary are going to do what we can to double what we gave last year. This virus be damned. So if you can, join the crowd that have already dug deeper. And here's the takeaway, the homework I often ask you to think about. Strong congregations cover the basics. Their lay leaders and staff remain focused on the mission. Everybody has a ministry of some kind. Their music programs are strong and feature many styles. And they treat their budgets as moral statements about who they are and what they ultimately value. So in that spirit, I ask you to keep it simple, folks. Tend to the basics. All for it. Even if we were a little bit clear about copyright laws, I would have asked Mary to sing Amazing Grace for you. I'm going to invite you to, wherever you are, if you'd like, maybe take a minute to look up the lyrics online. Just enter that title into any search engine, pick a lyric site, read or sing along. Imagine the day when we're going to sing this old song right here in this sanctuary once again. Pause to hear those voices, hear the parts, hear the harmonies. Sing along if you will.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears believe. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Twas grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's
Congratulations, viewers, you have made it through the first of these virtual, somewhat live services. You made it. As I said earlier, this is just a start. There are plenty of ideas that have come across my desk at home. There are plenty of ways to involve other folk in your fellowship. But for now, we close this time together with these words from retired UU educator Randy Becker. Anytime, Friday evening, Sunday morning, Monday afternoon, any place right now, Paris, Beirut, Baghdad, West Bank, Chad, Cameroon, Lebanon, Syria, Somalia, Sinai, Charleston, any number. 132, 19, 2, 43, 1, 228, 10. And so fear invites new participants to its dance. Fear asked, what do I have to do to get your soul? But every time in every one of these places, numbers beyond counting rise up and say, they say no to fear. They say no to hate. They say no to death. And yes, hope to life. Hope to hope. Yes to love. So may we now or anytime, here or anywhere, alone or with other numbers, focus on affirming what we love. Taking this time to remember what we cherish. What inspires us no matter what. What is it in us that puts fear on notice that our hearts and our minds and our spirits will not accept its invitation? But that is what faith is. Focusing on what one affirms in the face of fear. Thank you for watching. I wish you well. We'll be back again soon.